Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Sphinx in California. In 2017, archaeologists unearthed a sphinx buried underneath some sand dunes in California. It came as a pretty big surprise because for the past few decades, rumors have circulated of a lost Egyptian city buried somewhere along the California coastline. The rumor said the remains of an Egyptian temple, multiple sphinxes, gigantic lion statues, and huge statues of Pharaoh Ramses II were all buried 150 miles north of Los Angeles. The rumors were true. There really were Egyptian relics hidden underneath the California sand. Unfortunately, for all those hoping the statues were pieces of a lost civilization, they were in reality pieces of a lost movie set. Over 90 years ago, a film called The Ten Commandments was filmed in the Guadalupe Nipomo Dunes, and the people who made the movie didn't dispose of the film set properly. As a result, the plaster remains of set pieces wound up being slowly covered over by the dunes. The movie set was built in the 1920s and included over 20 sphinxes. Many of them are still buried and have been undisturbed for nearly a century. That makes them relics in their own way, but not in the exciting way that would prove ancient Egyptians once lived in the Golden State. The newly recovered Sphinx is now expected to be put on display at the Dunes Museum, and archaeologists are hoping to find the rest of the set pieces in future excavations. Number 9. A chained monk. Archaeologists with the Israel Antiquities Authority discovered an ancient Byzantine church in Israel. The church is part of the larger Khurbat el-Masani archaeological site and was once attached to a monastery that had its own inn for traveling pilgrims. The church was mostly cut out of rock, and researchers believe it was dedicated to Saint Zachary. But it wasn't the church that had the excavation team freaking out. It was the unexpected remains of a monk found buried in a tiny grave beside a pair of closed cells inside the church. The monk was found with a series of iron rings fastened around his neck, hands, and feet. Researchers believe the monk wore the extremely heavy iron rings as a way to prove his devotion to God. The monk lived 1,500 years ago, and the iron rings he wore weighed upwards of several dozen pounds. He lived something called an ascetic lifestyle, which meant he abstained from physical pleasures in the pursuit of spiritual salvation. His particular style was a lot more extreme than most. He likely chained his body to the rocks of a small cell, committing himself to solitary confinement. He would have inflicted great pain and suffering on himself, all in the pursuit of redemption from sin. This is one of the most extreme archaeological examples of the practice ever found. It was a big shock to archaeologists, who hadn't expected to find a self-tortured monk's bones and his iron rings. Number 8. The Saint in the Attic. A completely ordinary resident of St. John, New Brunswick, discovered religious relics from centuries past hiding in his attic. The relics included the bones of someone who may have been a saint. As far as random discoveries in your attic go, this one really takes the cake. The resident's daughter contacted the museum, and the museum sent an archaeologist, a group of nuns, a jeweler, and a Catholic priest to investigate. Even the Vatican and Interpol were brought into the investigation to figure out where the objects came from and if the bones were really the physical remains of a saint. It's important to know that the resident was not the original owner of the home. He originally purchased the house from a mysterious German family. When he went to snoop around in the attic, he found the religious relics stashed in a garbage bag. They were so neat, he thought they were Christmas decorations. According to the archaeologists, some of the relics are up to 500 years old, but who they belong to or how they got into the attic are both still a huge mystery. Christians have a long history of collecting the body parts of saints. The bones of dead saints are considered relics, and so it would make sense that the bones found with the other religious artifacts belonged to a real saint. The mystery now is figuring out which one. There is a possibility the relics were stolen during World War II, inherited by a German family, then forgotten in the attic when they moved out. Number 7. Mummified Macaw. An extremely strange discovery was recently made in a Mexican cave. A father and son uncovered an ancient burial containing the remains of a mummified macaw along with a human baby. According to the press release by the National Institute of Anthropology and History, the discovery was a freak accident. Residents of San Francisco de Borja in the state of Chihuahua were doing work on their property when they found the cave and the ghoulish remains hiding inside. The father and son team then notified the proper authorities, and archaeologists were sent in to investigate. The investigation revealed even more strange artifacts: 2 human skulls, some deer skin, a large seashell, and the head of the mummified macaw. But just what in the world happened here for such weird artifacts to be buried in the cave? Researchers say the remains were left in the cave between 700 and 1450 AD, but that's about all they know. They have no idea if the baby was related to the adults who were also buried in the cave, and the macaw makes it even more mysterious. The macaw is undoubtedly the most baffling part, since it wasn't native to northern Mexico. It would have been traded from another civilization living in the jungles far to the south. Macaws were prized animals all throughout Mesoamerica because their bright green and blue feathers connected them to rain and water. And now for number 6. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to say a big thank you to Raymond Palm and Levi Osamu for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about mysterious discoveries. Number 6. Artifacts in the Parthenon's walls. Artifacts have recently been found in Greece, in an extremely peculiar place. While restoration was being done at the famous Parthenon, sitting atop the Acropolis in central Athens, workers found lost relics. They were lodged inside the marble walls of the Parthenon. It's the ancient Greek version of finding cash stashed in the walls of your house. The ancient artifacts date back to the time of Pericles in the 5th century BC. For over 2,500 years, the artifacts were hidden inside the superstructure of the building. They were likely put inside the structure during the construction of the Parthenon between 447 and 438 BC. As you may have guessed already, it was the workers themselves who left the relics stashed in their own handiwork, perhaps as offerings to the goddess Athena. The first artifact was found in a narrow cavity, stashed behind a block in a deposit of loose soil. It was a shallow bronze bowl that contained a piece of a leg bone from an animal. The leg bone had been carved into a musical pipe and fitted with a bronze tube. The worker who so skillfully hid the offering would undoubtedly be very excited to know it remained exactly where he placed it for an astounding 25 centuries. Or maybe he would be mad that it was removed. Number 5. Egyptian artifact in Tennessee. U.S. Customs and Border Protection find strange things in strange places on a daily basis. But recently they uncovered something particularly odd. Customs officials discovered an ancient Egyptian artifact in a shipment in Memphis, Tennessee. The object was shipped to Memphis from Europe, a relic estimated to be 3,000 years old. Customs officials got a hold of experts at the University of Memphis who were more than happy to assess the item. They determined it to be the lid from a canopic jar, which would have once been used to hold the internal organs of a mummy. The lid was sculpted to look like a funeral deity named Imseti. Ancient Egyptians believed the deity, when carved on the lid of an organ jar, would protect the deceased's harvested organs after they died. It's believed this particular artifact came from the Third Intermediate Period, which lasted between 1069 and 653 BC. As for what the artifact was doing in Memphis, it likely had something to do with a black market purchaser bringing in items illegally. The lid is considered protected as an archaeological treasure, and so it was seized and turned over to Homeland Security investigations. Number 4. Dolphin lungs. A doctor on vacation in Texas made a bizarre discovery. According to Jamaica Beach Police Chief Andrew McLean, the doctor was walking his dog along the beach when his pet took interest in something half buried by the sand. McLean kneeled down to take a look and immediately called the police. He was pretty sure he had just discovered a human body part covered in sand. As a doctor, he knew instinctively he was looking at a single lung. There were no other human parts, just a random lung lying on the beach. When he began to scour the area for more parts, he found the second lung. McLean's unexpected discovery spawned chaos at Jamaica Beach. The medical examiner soon arrived, and it looked like the police could be dealing with a murder investigation. The lungs were taken to a lab where they determined the organs were not human. What the doctor had discovered was a pair of dolphin lungs, which looked surprisingly similar to human lungs. Now, officers feared they were dealing with a dolphin poacher, but when they surveyed the beach for more dolphin parts, they couldn't find anything. The whole ordeal turned into a really bizarre mystery. Dolphin lungs turned up on the beach with no other dolphin parts, and not even the experts could figure out how they got there. Number 3. Roman gold in England. Nick Bateman was a 53-year-old construction worker living in England when he took up the hobby of scouring fields and meadows with his metal detector. After many fruitless searches, he finally stumbled upon an unbelievable treasure in the middle of a barren field in Norfolk. It was an early Christmas present. Nick was swooping his metal detector through the field on Christmas Eve when it suddenly began to squeal. He thought maybe he had come across a discarded piece of metal, then nearly had a heart attack. He brushed away the dirt and found a medieval artifact. At least he thought it was a medieval artifact. It was a gold earring, which he then took to a jewelry specialist. The specialist told him it was much older than he thought it was. It was a remnant from the Roman occupation of England. That was roughly 2,000 years ago. When Nick got the news, he was so happy he went home and danced in the kitchen with his dog. After a bit of investigating, archaeologists believe they have some information on the Roman jewelry. It was likely worn by a woman and dangled from a hook in her ear, suspended from a loop so that it sparkled in the sun. The pendant was created from 2 small gold discs soldered together. How and why it ended up buried in a field is unknown. The wearer of the earring must have been a woman of some wealth, since earrings 2,000 years ago were a symbol of social status. Nick says every now and then he wonders what the woman's life was like and how she lost her precious earring. Number 2. Giant catfish in the desert. The fossilized remains of a giant catfish have been found in the last place you would ever imagine. Scientists unearthed the ancient bones in the hot, empty, and inhospitable wasteland of the Egyptian desert. The fossils were found in a place called Wadi el-Hitan, or Valley of the Whales. It's become famous in recent years because scientists have found the prehistoric remains of giant whales that lived millions of years ago and still partially had legs. It's such a rich area for fossils that it was designated a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 2005. But the catfish was still a pretty big surprise. This thing was over 6 feet long and lived 37 million years ago. It was uncovered by Sanaa El-Sayed, a 26-year-old student at Mansoura University studying vertebrate paleontology. The discovery was not only the first of its kind for an Egyptian-only team, but was also for an Egyptian woman. Researchers have already confirmed the newly discovered catfish belongs to a totally new genus and species. It was likely a formidable beast in the prehistoric ocean that once covered the Sahara Desert and most of Egypt. The catfish was so big, it could have swallowed a human. Number 1. Sunken propeller. Researchers with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recently made a strange discovery off the coast of Maine. Scientists were baffled when their camera picked up a large propeller sitting amongst some rocks, sea anemones, and sea stars 100 miles from shore. There was no shipwreck, no other debris, just a random propeller at the bottom of the ocean. The discovery was made from the fishing vessel Mary Elizabeth during a seafloor survey. Captain Phil Lynch couldn't believe the chances that the team dropped the camera right on top of the propeller. The captain said he doesn't even know anyone who's lost a propeller at sea, let alone 100 miles from shore. The propeller was worth at least $5,000. It was completely intact and must have belonged to a vessel about 60 feet long. That means the vessel was about as big as the Mary Elizabeth. Nobody knows what boat the propeller belonged to or how it ended up at the bottom of the ocean. All the scientists wanted was to collect data on fish, but stumbled upon a maritime mystery they may never solve. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and come back soon. See you next time. Bye!